Hello, and thank you for tuning in to News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. You are listening to the Lynn Fairley and Friends Show. My name is Journey Wade-Hak, and I have the distinct privilege of standing in for Lynn today. We have an awesome topic and guests lined up for you today for the hour. My friend and someone I really admire named Jordan Zweig is in the studio with us. He's just come back from 3 months in the jungles of Panama, building a town from scratch. And there's a lot to get into here. Let's start off with Jordan. If you could please tell us a little bit about yourself, your age, where you grew up.
Yeah, thanks, Journey. First of all, thanks for having me. Right here.
Oh, with a little mic thing there. But anyhow,
Brilliant.
like you were saying.
Yeah, I'm actually a local kid. I grew up here in Ventura County in Ojai. 22, been studying environmental science and ecology in Santa Barbara. Had a long time passion, probably the last 5 or 6 years, for agriculture, sustainable living, and community, which kind of gets us into what we were talking about today.
Awesome, yeah. And so you found out about this place is called Caluyala.
Yep, Caluyala.
And it's in the jungles of Panama, and pretty remote from any quote-unquote civilization around it, except itself, I suppose.
Yeah.
And how'd you find out about this?
Well, I ran into some travelers when I was down in Costa Rica a couple of years ago doing some volunteer work, who had recently just come from Caluyala, actually. They recommended it highly, and I looked into it.
Awesome. So the idea of it is, could you give us, like in a nutshell, what the whole place is about?
Sure. The idea is it's actually a large project on building a sustainable town from scratch. What the idea is to build a modern town, so keeping in mind electricity, internet, business, things that are not going to be going anywhere anytime soon. So basically forming new types of community and eventually rebuilding cities to be more sustainable.
That's awesome. Jeez. So how long have they been trying to do this for? I understand it's maybe since like 2007 or something?
About, yeah.
Thereabouts? Okay, great. And there's actually an awesome documentary if people want to check it out. It's available on YouTube from Viceland, I guess a subsidiary of Vice, called Jungletown.
Jungletown, yeah, it's a series right now.
And there's just a heads up, there is some adult content, language and so on, but overall, in my opinion, mild enough and a really entertaining and informative bit. But I think you might have some commentary on that actually, as to how informative it is, because you lived there with these people in this place, and then it's probably pretty surreal to see what a news organization does when they come and they take video of it and they edit it and they craft a narrative that maybe doesn't correspond exactly to your experience. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Well, I was lucky enough that my semester being there was no cameras on us. That really changes the dynamic of the people there, I think. But they really, what you see on that TV show is what, like you said, it's a little bit of a crafted narrative. It's the people who chose to be on TV, a lot of them did not. And it's kind of taking a certain point of view, look at what's going on down there without a lot of the actual human interaction. So there's a lot of the business aspects, some community, and not so much of the personal aspect on some level.
Yeah, I'm sure. So people can go check that out on YouTube if they want to learn more. But wait till the end of this show, because you're going to learn a lot from Jordan here. I'm curious, you talk about sustainability, and I understand that sustainability is a passion, an important interest of yours. Can you elaborate a little bit on what that entails in the case of Caluyala? And I understand permaculture is maybe a phrasing that is kind of a buzzword you've mentioned in the past, and I'm curious if you could kind of break down for us what goes into the difference between going into the middle of the jungle and just building a town, quote unquote normal town, and what you're doing there, and the different methods and approaches and philosophy, really.
I think there's a lot of these buzzwords that kind of surround what we're doing down there at Caluyala. But essentially, we are trying to build a town that is sustainable in the sense that it is self-sustaining, it is producing its own food, it is independent from the outside systems of Panama City and other things around Panama, but at the same time, still interacting with the communities around Panama and giving back and being involved, which is kind of a long-term goal at this point. It's not entirely food independent, it is not entirely sustainable, but it is currently sequestering more carbon than it produces into the atmosphere. It is sustainable by a lot of senses. However, that's kind of the long-term goal, and I feel like oftentimes sustainability is kind of thrown around in a lot of different ways. But
somewhat empty ways.
Yeah, a lot of empty ways. It's kind of that kind of word, but sustainability at Caluyala is both environmental. It's kind of it's a social goal, as well as kind of there's a lot of business enterprise that comes out of Caluyala, which is a big goal of theirs to create sustainable business and business that gives back to the local community.
So you went down there as an intern. There's like a core kind of skeleton of 20 people or so that kind of run the place year round, if I'm not
50
mistaken.
50 or
50
so.
or so, okay.
It's been growing
And
constantly.
and then you've got a bunch of this round that you were in. You had what, maybe
56 interns. Which is
56 interns.
one of the smaller ones as of late. Next semester, starting here in June, I'll actually have 150 interns.
Okay, so I wonder. I bet there's kind of an interesting. You tell me, but there's kind of an interesting thing there with where you're out in the open and there's this vast, beautiful a jungle around you, and then at the same time, it can get very claustrophobic. I imagine if you've got a bunch of people working together. I'm sure there's a lot of pros and cons with that. When you're all kind of you against the elements and trying to stick to your initial goals. Can you tell us a little bit about? Was there mediation required at any points? Most of you are young people, right?
Yeah, luckily I think our semester has been one of the less traumatic in some sense. It is really, if you've grown up in a small town, you kind of know that small town vibe. It really is. You could yell someone's name and across town they'll yell back, and but at the same time you're out in the elements, you're out in the jungle. But and then there's elements of a larger society. You have shops, you have kitchen, you have things running all the time, people working every day, out busy like filming things, building things like that. But really, at the same time, there's nowhere to go to hide from anybody. There's no privacy, really.
I see.
Very limited in that way.
But there's also probably not a whole lot of time to dilly-dally and fret over various dramas and whatnot.
That's
so
true.
that's good. I mean, it sounds like overall everybody had a common purpose coming there, and more or less, humans are what they are, but they stuck to their goals.
It did. It did bring and unite a group of people that really had a lot of common interest and goals. So it wasn't too much conflict there.
That's really cool. And so you're dealing with not just the flora, but the fauna, right? I mean, there's a lot of wild animals that probably sort of wander in through the middle of what would be your front yard.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Well, what kind of creatures were you seeing out there?
Well, just about all day and all night, you hear howler monkeys going off in the mountains. All sorts of monkeys come through camp all the time. There's a lot of lizards, iguanas, things like that.
Does that make it hard to sleep?
The first couple nights maybe. The chickens kept us up in the morning, things like that. But really, you get used to it. There's a lot of noise in the jungle, and it starts to be kind of a background noise.
Yeah, I was just talking to a friend of mine about how, for folks who go and live off the land more, they come back, and there was someone who stayed with my parents before I was born who had done this, and he said he couldn't sleep because of the fridge buzzing. And I guess we all get used to that sound. We often just take it for granted, and I imagine, though it's kind of surreal to me, I imagine howler monkeys are not unlike that, in that it's just sounds of the outdoors, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That's awesome.
In fact, just since coming back, while there are still cars, the sound of cars going to sleep, things like that, traffic and whatnot, but it's a little quieter here than there, honestly, most nights.
That's really cool. In terms of, I'm curious how management worked there. I mean, it's interns coming in, and they're essentially volunteering to put their labor and their service towards things. Was it a pretty strict hierarchy? Did it feel more flat in the way it was as a community, or I'm curious how that panned out. Did someone have to lay down the law a lot?
So essentially, Kaliyala as an organization is kind of structured into 4 major pillars. There's the actual town, the current only town in existence in Panama. Then there is also the institute, which all the interns are part of. It's kind of like the schooling process where we take classes and then we actually build things that contribute to the town. Then there is the organization that actually is working on is eventually going to be building more towns and retrofitting other cities to be more sustainable. And then there's kind of an incubator, so if you propose a business or you can run something, you can run it out of the town as well.
Wow.
Within these structures are organized very well. The institute runs quite smoothly, but the actual community of the town has not been something that's been managed by the actual organization very well. So it is quite a hierarchical system, but the community of interns is kind of left to do their own thing. So we were all very equal, but did not get a lot of say in what happened with the larger happenings of like the larger parts of the organization. So there's a little bit of miscommunication there. We kind of had to form our own government, make choices, and there's a little bit of protest sometimes. Things don't go super smoothly. Last semester, I believe they actually had a revolution of interns. Tried to change the system of government. We had people's projects to actually build a new form of student government while we're there.
What kind of system were they going from and to? I mean, this sounds like more or less a democracy, right?
More or less, yeah. There wasn't really much. There's not much when you get there, so they don't have a framework for you. You get there, it's a clean slate. You kind of have to figure it out. The first couple weeks seem like heaven. Seems like everything. You can do whatever you want. You start to you've been with these people for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. It starts to get a little okay. There's a little bit more drama, a little more complex interactions, and you kind of have to build your own form of social structure And there's really no government when you get there for the students, so it all has to kind of come naturally. We ended up building a council and weekly meetings, things like that, to make decisions on what's going to happen around the camp.
So it's like any democracy, I guess. There's a little bit of messiness, but it sounds like more or less things work out their own kinks, and people get together. That's so cool. Okay, so I understand this is in. Tell me if I'm pronouncing this right. Chagres National Park.
Yeah.
And that's, I heard, one of 20 biological hotspots in the world. Do you know much? Can you tell us much about what that means?
Well, there's an immense amount of biodiversity in this area. Kaliala is actually backed up right against this Chagres National Park, this national forest. Huge amount of biodiversity and amount of flora and fauna and things like that. It's the edge of the rainforest, actually, where Kaliala exists, was burned down to use as grazing land for many years, and Kaliala is part of a reforestation effort to be rebuilding that part of the forest. But I had the privilege of backpacking and rafting through the Chagres a couple times. Gorgeous area, a lot of amazing animals and plant life. Relatively untouched. When the national park was put up, a lot of the families that were farming and lived in the area are allowed to stay, so there's still little remote huts and
I mean, they've been doing that
farms
for generations for the most part, right?
For a
so
very
they
long
know
time.
how to work with the land,
Yeah.
right?
So there's a huge amount of biodiversity, both within flora and fauna, as well as in people tucked away with a lot of unique views and a lot of unique techniques on living in the jungle, like living it out and roughing it in the woods, essentially.
That's great. That's great. That's always interesting when you see people who've either they've been born there or they've intentionally sort of secluded themselves from the more common society, I guess you could say.
Right. It's really seeing a totally different culture when you're in there. They have this amazing jungle farmer culture that's going on, the campesinos. But at the same time, if you're hiking through the woods, they're laughing at you because they have to hike for work all day. They're in nature all the time. They kind of want to spend their free time going to the city, and we spend our free time hiking in the woods, and they think we're a little ridiculous.
I see. So you're sort of switching worlds,
right,
in a
exactly.
sense. That's funny. Yeah, they go out clubbing, and you go out stargazing
Exactly.
as a contrast from your regular life. That's cool. All right. So, and then I understand you also. I heard this concept a few years ago, and it blows my mind. Can you explain to us what humanure is?
Oh yeah. So humanure is a system that is for the most part illegal within the United States for commercial use. Commercial being a interesting key term here, but it is really just doing your business in a compost toilet that turns your excrement into compost and usable fertilizer for growing food. Essentially, closing that loop is a term they would like to use at Kaliala.
Closing that loop, and so you had that was all the toilets at.
No, they have a blackwater system fed regular flush toilets as well, but the primary toilets are compost toilets, and every couple semesters that does get emptied and used on the farm.
Wow. Okay, so it gets some time to.
It's not doo-doo by the time you're done.
Oh, that's excellent. Well, yeah. So that's always just something that blows my mind. It's very different from you get down to the details of whether it's the sewage system or the way you grow your food or the way you build your housing. When you're looking at sustainability, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but it's pretty gnarly to me to see the ways in which you can be so different from what we have here, say in Ventura,
right.
For better or for worse. So that's a good one. I want to remind our callers that if you have any questions or comments for our listeners, that you have any questions or comments for myself or Jordan or this topic, please feel free to call in. The number to dial between now and 1 is 805-650-1590. You are listening to News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. I'm Journey Zephyr, Journey Wade-Hak. Zephyr's my middle name. Talking with Jordan Zweig. We've been childhood friends, and so there's an old history of calling ourselves Jay-Z, but that gets off into a whole other category. You had kids from all around the world at Kaliala. I'm curious. I saw in the Vice documentary you had kids from Canada, kids from I think Amsterdam, kids from. Were there many folks from, say, Africa or Asia, or what was the kind of demographics of what you had there? Again, mostly young people, right?
Absolutely.
And mostly women, no?
Yeah, it was just about 80% women, I believe. Yeah. 80%
women. Wow. Goodness gracious. So that's a change. Also, I bet from
living in a little bit more of a matriarchal society down there.
Yeah, matriarchal. Yeah, I guess if it's a democracy more or less, and it's mostly women, then that's what you'll get, right? That's cool. That leaves a lot of questions. I'm curious also. this kind of leads us to what the purpose of sustainability and why it's getting philosophies and practices related to sustainable living are getting, I think, more popular, especially with younger people, and as more people become convinced by the arguments that climate change is a real and serious threat. You at 22 years old, and happy birthday, by the way. Jordan just turned 22 about a week ago. Your perspective on hope for the future and where something like what you've been doing for the last 3 months ties in to getting from here to there. In terms of, it seems like a lot of people, I know there's some who disagree, but there's a lot of people who are very, very afraid of what could be happening in the next 10, 20, 50 years with regard to a changing climate and what people can do about it. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about, did you feel empowered by this experience in relation to that?
Well, I do think there's plenty of reason to be scared for what's going to be coming in the near future. However, this experience really did put me in touch with a lot of people and see a lot of people who have a lot of passion for these kinds of things. And I think that the movement, which is largely surrounded by youth people our age, for sustainability and social justice, things like that, sustainability both in the environment and within our businesses and our social interactions, is really a movement that it's really the biggest sort of organized movement in the world, except for that it's really not so organized, right? It's basically, you see there's really no bigger movement going on except for it's not organized together. There's more nonprofits for environmentalism, for social justice than anything else in the world, but they're not all communicating. It's not a movement with a single leader, right? So it's not something we see it's not displayed in a unified way. We see a lot of people doing a lot of good things, not communicating with each other, not organized together, but I think there's a lot of things that I've seen that make me really a lot more optimistic, a lot more positive about what we're seeing, especially with this generation of youth who's going to be coming up and building new businesses, new ways to live. But there is definitely that ominous background noise of the approaching doom, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it does seem like some of the reports make it look pretty dire. But it is interesting. Do you think that if these organizations were able to maybe not come together under one leader, but organize together a little bit more, it'd be a more effective way of combating some of the challenges that we have coming up?
I think that they might be able to get more done working together, but even more so, just being seen working together and having that be a larger movement voiced as one would really inspire more people and show a little more optimism to the rest of the world. People would see that people are actually making positive change, and it would be a driving force for more people to do so.
Makes sense. That's good. And do you feel that there's any specific things that come to mind with regard to Kaliyala, where having been in it for about 3 months and just being fresh back, where let's say you're in charge of it, anything that you would immediately change or shift directions with, or anything like that?
At Kaliyala?
Yeah.
Maybe not particularly.
So they more or less have it.
I had an easier time adjusting to the style of living down there than some other people. I think that they have a great framework for people who come there and want to live a sustainable lifestyle for the most part. You come there and you get put into a system of sustainable living. Your lifestyle changes dramatically, except for some of us, especially in like areas like California, the coasts, a more progressive mindset. Some of us have been I've lived in communal living before this, actually when I grew up here in Ventura County, and a little more sustainable living experience than some others. But I honestly did agree with most of the way that they approach day-to-day life in Kaliyala. Maybe some of the systems aren't the most efficient as they could be right now, but overall their long-term goals and things that they're looking towards moving forward towards in the future are very admirable and I think very sustainable on multiple scales.
Are you largely growing your own food down there, or
that's
living
the goal
off the land? Yeah.
Right now, with the amount of people there, especially this coming semester, and our farms are constantly expanding. I was actually one of the agriculture interns at Kaliyala. That's what I'm studying mostly at home. We are producing only about a little less than 10% of the food that Kaliyala for themselves. So there's still a massive amount of food that they end up having to buy from, mostly from the local community. It is an agriculture community outside of Kaliyala, so local farms, local ranches, things like that.
That's good. So it's still all pretty nearby.
It's still very local, not a lot of transportation in there, but at the same time, currently, most of the food production is done outside of the farm. However, the farm is constantly growing. They have a lot of property that is yet to mature. So in a couple years, that's looks like I'm thinking 4 or 5 years they're gonna go up to 30-40% food independence and
That's great.
continue building the farms beyond after that and exponentially growing.
So it's a work in progress.
Absolutely,
Things are
everything down
going.
there is a work in progress.
That's great. That's we need more of that and probably less quick fixes or attempted quick fixes. They seldom work out, do they? It seems like, if I understand correctly, you were the tendency for most folks down there was to be on a vegetarian diet just because of what you had access to. Is that accurate, or can you
For the
tell us
most
more
part,
about that?
I'm a vegetarian at home. I had a really easy time being a vegetarian down there. The kitchen worked so hard all day, every day, making us 3 meals a day for about 120, 130 people.
Oh, wow.
And essentially, you can always be a vegetarian there. There's always, every day, there's vegetarian, vegan, and gluten-free options.
Gluten-free?
Yeah, even,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
I know all of your buzzwords in one meal.
Yeah.
But
A lot of eye rolling, maybe.
really, when there is meat, there's always those options. A lot of the time, they're combined, so the things you'll be eating are vegan and gluten-free to start with. But everyone eats them, and then at the same time, if there is meat, it's obviously just an option down there. However, a lot of people had a lot of issues with this. A lot of people, both in the staff and the intern population, feel very strongly about meat being a big issue around sustainability and around food sustainability, things like this.
Feeling like it's necessary, or like were they more strongly one way or the other?
There's a lot of vegans who felt very strongly that if we wanted to be such a model sustainable town for the world, that we should not be eating meat.
Okay.
And Kaliyala is actually located in and around a lot of ranching land, and owns actually ranching land in which they're going to continue trying to ranch and essentially look for best and sustainable practices for ranching beef. So they want to keep ranching and producing meat, but at the same time find the best practices for that and contribute to global knowledge and sustainable meat production. A lot of people had an issue with that, thinking that when the interns leave, like they've been sustainably eating meat, that's fine, but when they go home, they go home with the idea that eating meat can still be sustainable and it's still a good thing. So,
in a very different context.
Right, yeah, very different context. People might go home and still be eating meat, and a lot of people had issues with the idea that we would still be, contributing to that sort of
environmental issues
exactly.
and so on. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Wow, that's this is such a mind-boggling thing to picture. Just I've never personally gone out of my bubble very far. I've gone out of my bubble into other quote unquote civilized bubbles, but not into the jungle or anything like that, kind of off the grid. So this is really cool for me to learn about. We're getting near our break here, but I noticed in the documentary there's a lot of references to going around the town or the camp basically and shoveling poop that appears there, and it seems like you would in your yard with your dog or something. But I was curious. I only saw like one dog, maybe two, around there. I'm assuming you had some other creatures wandering through the camps, as you mentioned earlier, or through the town, I should say. You got a lot of monkeys and so on, or?
Well, the things you do see on that TV show are very, selective. I didn't. No one spent too much time shoveling poop. Although some of us agriculture interns really did get excited about it when we could use the horse manure for our projects for building compost and things like that.
But it just makes for good TV.
Absolutely, for shoveling poop. There are horses that wander wild through the jungle down there that have become essentially feral. There's horses roaming the jungle, and we have a couple on the property. So I'm sure they're shoveling horse poop, and there's probably 5 or 6 dogs, 3 of which are like owned by staff, and then there's a lot of wild dogs in Panama, a huge amount of feral and wild dogs that will be wandering through the jungle. So they're friendly towards interns, but they, I'm sure they were contributing to that same issue.
Yeah, so that doesn't get mixed in with the humanure.
No,
that's a separate
different issue.
Separate
entirely.
issue, yeah. Oh wow, goodness gracious! So I'm learning a lot about that. I noticed another big thing, or again, maybe this was blown out of proportion, but water logistics. You're working mostly with PVC pipe on out of the stream. Tell me a little bit more about that. What's so funny?
That just was a very highly dramatized part of the first episode. I've only actually seen the first episode of the series at this point, but the entire water system of Kaliyala is currently fed from the tributary, which draws water out of the Iguana River, which is right there. Kaliyala is actually located right at the meeting point of the Pecora and the Iguana rivers. Currently the entire water system is essentially suspended PVC pipes leading from pretty close to the spring down into the town, which means since all the water is being drawn from the river, if they're to not use the water, it's just going right down and into the canal essentially, down further through the park and then into the ocean. But that there's a lot of issues on day to day. Pipes will break. Things will, very often water will be out. But at the same time, we can run water in the farm pretty much constantly, and it's just diverted from the river, and then there's not a lot of waste there.
So there's just a lot of maintenance to keep
a lot of maintenance,
up and running.
It's still a work in progress, just like I said, with pretty much everything down there.
Well, you
remember.
You got at any given time, approximately 100 people or so. Yeah, sometimes a lot more, sometimes a bit less. And how often are you able to do things like shower there and whatnot? Is this with the limited water? Or with water being such a labor to maintain and it becomes a more precious thing, I'm sure. Do you get to do your once a day, or is it?
I think in the past, before they had the current water tanks that they have in place, it was a little more difficult. You could shower every day, if you wanted to, at least once. With the current system in place, because the showers are located a lot closer to the water source than the rest of camp. But a lot of people just go swim in the river at least once or twice a day anyways, or, it's easy.
All natural.
You're living in the jungle, so you're pretty dirty, but we had access to showers pretty much anytime we like.
That's good. Yeah. That's great. And I understand people were focused on different sort of specialties when they were there as interns, right? I mean, you had people focusing more on building, on I think media was one of the options. Yeah. What does media in the jungle entail?
Well, so yeah, there's a handful of different programs. All the interns in one or the other, sometimes multiple, doing larger group projects, and then everyone does an individual project or group project which they'll present at the end. Pretty much everything you build or create contributes to the town in some way. This semester, the media team was pretty small. I think it was 2 or 3 girls. They all, as a group, their project was a podcast that they started a couple episodes of on Kaliyala, interviewed a couple of people, because there's really some interesting minds that we have teaching and coming to study there. So they interviewed several people, created a fun little podcast, which is being edited currently, and I think will be released pretty soon on the internet, as well as little video and photo stories. I'm
going to cut you off there real quick for our break, and we'll continue in a moment. You're listening to News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. My name's Journey Wade-Hak. This is the Lynn Fairley and Friends Show. We're with our guest, Jordan Zweig, talking about his experiences in the jungle, building a town from scratch, basically, or being part of it anyhow. And we're going to take our break with the Shoemaker Brothers right now.
Dancing girl, fell so hard that it rocked my world. Headed off to a place in Iraq, and that man that she loved.
That was the Shoemaker Brothers. They're always here at the half point for Lynn's show, and they're always wonderful to hear. You can go Google them or check out more of their music online. I've got 2 announcements for you folks. The first one is from the Rubicon Theater. They have a songwriting, looks like a songwriting competition here. And I'll just start what they've written here. Music moves hearts and minds around social issues like no other medium. Musicians who create and deliver music of social change are vital catalysts, able to facilitate emotional connections to the issues of our time and awaken activism. We are seeking artists to share their music as part of this competition and join us for all or part of a week-long festival of events May 8th to 13th titled Music for Changing Times, Looking Back and Moving Forward. The competition and events take place at Rubicon Theater Company in Ventura, California. There's a first place award of a $3,000 cash prize, a second place award of a $2,000 cash prize, and a third place award of a $1,000 cash prize. So you can learn more about that by going to rubicontheater.org, making sure that I have their website correct. But yeah, you can Google them, you can find them on the web, and go on from there. It's a really exciting competition, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of really great stuff out of it. Even if you don't submit, you can go and look at, go and have a listen to some really talented artists. Then the other thing I have for you is the Krishnamurti Foundation of America in Ojai's East End has its annual May gathering coming up, and they have a little announcement here I'll read to you. Understanding Ourselves Annual Gathering, May 6th to 7th. We invite you to our annual May gathering at the Krishnamurti Center in Ojai. Friends both local and from around the world come to listen to speakers, participate in dialogues, attend workshops, or simply hang out. Choose from different programs on topics such as consciousness and education, or engage with teachers from our schools and scholars of Krishnamurti's teachings who share their understanding. So that goes from 8:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Saturday and Sunday, May 6th and 7th. There's a lunch available. You'll have to purchase tickets for that. So you'll go online and find that. But otherwise, the events are free. You can go hang out, hopefully learn some cool stuff. Their campus is beautiful, by the way. There's a wonderful botanical herb garden up there that my mother actually manages, so I have a bit of a bias, but I really recommend checking it out. The sites are amazing, and the people are really insightful and interesting. So yeah, we've got a great songwriting competition, and we've got this wonderful gathering that they do every year at the Christian Remedy Foundation, so I really encourage everybody to go check that out. You are listening to News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. My name is Journey Wade-Hak. I'm talking to Jordan Zweig here about his experiences in Panama in a place called Kalayala, building a sustainable town as an intern there for 3 months. And we've got a lot more to cover, but if we have any callers who are interested in asking questions or comments, the number to dial is 805-650-1590, 805-650-1590. Please feel free to call in and join the conversation. So, Jordan, we were talking about, right before the break, we were talking about some of the programs that interns do at this place, and you were talking about how this last batch, there's maybe just 3 girls doing media, and we're going into what media in the jungle would be like. You talked about podcasts and so on. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you were doing, what your specific subset was there, and go on from there?
Absolutely. I was an intern in the Sustainable Agriculture Program, which is actually one of the larger programs. We had about 13 interns, I believe. Started studying largely agroecology, forestry, and permaculture, which was a lot of what I've been studying in the past, and actually things I already knew about when I got there. So a lot of what I ended up doing was helping facilitate and teach some of the lectures.
Oh, great!
Being that I had already learned a lot of it. But our main projects were expanding and building a greenhouse down there. We were building new and expanding garden bed systems and creating different sorts of irrigation systems as well.
Wow, goodness gracious! So that's really cool, though. You've already got this understanding in this area, and you get to go and sort of put it into practice and teach
Absolutely.
Others along the way.
Got a lot more of a hands-on kind of work. And then my personal project actually ended up dealing with water management and water reuse. I ended up dealing with a project in building a gray water system for the kitchen that would treat their wastewater, use it to grow algae to produce biofuel for the biology team. That's a part of their main project over there. So we were providing algae for them, providing clean water that would be flowing out of our kitchen through some garden beds and eventually back into the river. So eliminating some of our pollution footprint, creating garden beds, and also growing algae for the biology team.
That's great. Using less water, making cleaner air, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. And tell me, what is biofuel?
So biofuel or biodiesel is a type of fuel that we can actually, they're working on right now, perfecting over at Kalayala, their system so that they can run their generators, run their cars, things like that, off of a fuel that is made from methyl alcohol, different sorts of plant products that can create a fossil fuel alternative, essentially.
That's awesome. Wow. So you guys are working away in the lab out there, if you could call it that. That's really great. And my understanding is that for the town itself, you have to actually hike in. What is it, like 3 miles or something like that?
Yeah, it's pretty. It's a pretty serious hike for someone who isn't your avid hiker. There is trucks that run in and out of the valley occasionally on weekends and things like that. But upon arrival, they make sure all the interns that can that hike in for the true experience of realizing you're kind of out in the jungle. But it is possible to take larger vehicles with 4-wheel drive in there, but it's a pretty treacherous road for some.
I see. So overall, it's you set the mood, and it's not too pragmatic to have cars going all the time, right?
Exactly. If they pave that road, it would really change the experience of going out to Colorado. I think it really makes it feel like it's a lot more in the boonies than you realize, because Panama's a pretty small country, so by relative scale, they're not that far away from the city, but that road really separates you from civilization.
That's so cool. Goodness gracious, I'm just getting excited about this whole thing. Maybe I'll have to go, which leads me to ask, who would you recommend, and maybe who would you not recommend? What kind of person to go and do what you did, basically, and be at Kalayala?
I think I've had a lot of luck in terms of going to Kaliyala, in terms of my ease in living there. I've been a relatively outdoorsy person most of my life, really passionate about being in nature and living sustainably and building things with my hands. So that was easy for me. But there were people from all walks of life, not so outdoorsy, going to work there, because there's really programs in all different kinds of fields. They really want a lot of diversity in helping build this sort of sustainable town. They still want it to be modern and all-inclusive, after all. So you could go and you could make a video or a photo series, or you could go in and you could write a new system of government for them and have them put it into practice for a little while. You could really do just about anything. You just have to kind of get over your fear of bugs and large animals, because you really are living in the jungle. So.
Oh my goodness! Wow. And so you need a lot of go-getters, basically.
Right, it's true.
A lot of people.
Pretty much everyone who's going is really passionate about something and is really looking to learn and give back and help build a community with what they know and what they are able to do. But pretty soon here, it's going to be a lot easier standards of living. They're really expanding the buildings that you can stay in, and it's going to be a lot more luxurious standard of living. So it'll be a little less like camping in the jungle. But
so you're the pioneer section of this in a lot of ways.
I think
right?
we're just about the end of the beginning in a way. It's been pretty small scale, and after this semester, it's really scaling out a bit. It's going to be growing very quickly. So
you can finally reap some of the benefits of a few waves of interns, right?
Right, correct.
That's great. Goodness gracious, I'm excited. Well, I'll probably have to check this out and go. We don't have any callers right now, do we, Spence? No. Okay, that's right. If you are interested in throwing out your comments or questions, if you have a bone to pick on some topic, please feel free to call 805-650-1590. You're listening to News Talk KBTA 1590 AM. My name is Wade-Hak. And we might just have a caller right there. Who knows? So I'm excited then to... I'm curious what your perspective is on how to apply what you learned in that jungle here in say Ojai, where you live, or Ventura County broadly. I think a lot of people here and elsewhere are really interested in serving their community and giving back. And whatever you think about the climate change issue, I think everyone values clean air and clean water. I think we have a caller here right now. His name's Al. Welcome to the show, Al. How are you?
I have a question to ask you about the jungle. Did you ever run into or hear of a jaguar down there? I think there's still some in Panama, maybe, because they're in the Amazon, but they're getting scarce. They used to range up the American desert.
Jordan, he's asking what kind of animals you run across. Do you run into any jaguars, anything dangerous? Can you tell us about it?
I knew a couple people who had seen a jaguar in their time there over 3 or 4 years, but for the most part, that's a pretty rare sighting. It's kind of rumored and joked about a bit, but most of what you see is a lot of monkeys, capuchins, white-faced capuchins, the tamarin monkeys, a lot of howler monkeys. You see toucans, all sorts of massive quantity of amazing birds and insects and things like that.
Nothing that's going to eat you too much.
There's nothing too dangerous. The horses and the cows will charge you, but that's not too bad.
It's just a day in the life, right?
Exactly.
You're just getting run over by horses and cows.
Chickens wander out of their pens constantly. Yeah, that's nothing to worry about.
You're young, you'll manage. That's good. Thank you, Al. That was a great question. My goodness. So what I was wondering is how to apply the lessons that you'd taken from there, besides dodging horses and cows, into taking that to wherever you come from in the world. You have these kids from all over the world coming, and then they're taking this knowledge back. For you and for our listeners in Ventura County, a lot of people really want to give back. They really want to be of service. And as I was saying right before we got that wonderful caller, regardless of what your position is on things like climate change and so on, everyone values clean air and clean water and doing things smart, doing things efficiently with our resources. So can you tell us a little bit about what you see for the future for taking these lessons, and you already have a background in this as well, and putting it into practice in Ojai, for example?
Well, I think that was kind of the biggest issue everyone at Kaliyala struggled with, is taking what you've learned there, when you've been living, the lifestyle you've been living, back to wherever you come from. I think I'm pretty lucky in that case in coming back to Ventura, coming back to Ojai. A lot of progressive thinkers, a lot of things like that. But it's good to take both, the most progressive, sustainable concepts with the most traditional at the same time. We can't totally change our system super radically immediately. Sure. But I think some of the biggest things I really learned from going down there were dealing with problem solving, finding innovative solutions to problems, and it's really kind of a little bubble where you can experiment with all sorts of new ideas for sustainable living, for sustainable food production, things like that. For what I dealt with, and experience failure or find information that's going to really help you. But it really inspired, I think, everyone who was there to try new things, find innovative solutions. When you see a problem, what are the possible solutions? How could this solution provide the most benefit to what you're doing back home? So problem solving in the most innovative way and creating really, really out there ideas a lot of times.
So there's that saying, you fall off the horse, you get back on again, but maybe
Right.
in this case you get charged by the horse or the
Right.
cow,
And
and
then
you
you
get back up and keep going, right?
And run away. That's
And
right.
run away to
Yep.
safety. But that's so great. God, this leaves me with a lot of questions. I'm curious. Then also, I think we have another caller coming in. I'm curious also if you could tell us about where you started with this. How did you get into? You mentioned that you'd lived in some sustainable communities or people trying to live off the grid. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got there? I think we might have just lost that caller, but if
Well,
yeah,
my
where'd this come
experience
from?
with communal living really started pretty early. I grew up in a intentional community here in Ventura County when I was growing up in Ojai.
Intentional community. Can you break that down for us?
Yeah, sure. It was just a community of people all living with a kind of a common goal in mind of living sustainably, producing our own food, hosting things like workshops, different types of educational programs to teach people about growing food, producing things like that. A lot of buzzwords there too. A lot of health food, a lot of granola, a lot of hippies and like yoga and whatnot.
Granola, yeah.
Really, and then living in Ojai and being around a lot of agricultural communities and things like that really inspired me to look into where my food came from and eventually start growing my own food and things like that. So then I was part of several communities who would work on community gardens and things like that to produce food for the community. And I think that's really what got me started into looking into sustainability through agriculture. But I think this trip really opened my eyes to the idea that farmers are not the only people that are going to save the world, right? So a lot of our issues today that we talk about are surrounding food, but I think there's a lot of issues that everyone can cover. And, being sustainable doesn't just apply only to environmentals and to food, but just about you can be sustainable in whatever you do. And I think that's really what I learned here is that we can have farmers working towards saving the planet at the same time as people with cameras and people with all sorts of different businesses.
Just one moment. We've got our caller Peggy in right now. Peggy, what do you got to say?
Oh, I'm listening to the radio at the same time, so I'm a little I wanted to compliment the young man. He is an incredible presenter. It's so hard to believe he's so young. And what I wanted to comment was when they talk about climate change, I happen to have just recently heard several presentations by astrophysicists and very reputable people in the field, and they say we're not really undergoing climate change. And it sort of bothers me when we keep talking about things and scientists keep saying it doesn't exist.
So, if I understand correctly, you're saying that there's some controversy, and we're talking about issues of anthropomorphic climate change, but there's as if it's a given when really there seems to be more controversy for that. I would like to add, thank you. I agree that Jordan is a very presentable, articulate young man, and we're very glad to have him here on News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. Let's see, Jordan, do you have any response to that?
I think a lot of the disagreements often surround the fact that the word climate change doesn't, a lot of people don't know exactly what it means, and it's often debated what exactly they're talking about when they say climate change doesn't exist. But
what do we really mean?
What do we really mean? It's kind of one of these buzzwords again, and I feel like it's often that's where a lot of the miscommunication lies. But if you look, a lot of the scientific community as a whole, the vast majority agree that there is environmental damage and climate change based off of the systems that we have in place for our economics and our living right now. But it is, I agree. It's very disheartening when you hear people, say things that you've been maybe told evidence of one thing and then you hear another and then
it gets quite to be a mind-boggling.
It's hard to sift through what kind of information you want to listen to or what you believe to be true. But
well, and then on that note, I wonder what would you like people to take from. You're here to relay your experiences. You've been through this really incredible on multiple levels, learning about what I think if you if I understood you correctly, it's not just sustainability in farming and sustainability in housing and so on, but it's actually sustainability in your interpersonal relationships, sustainability in every facet of your life, and how to make things work out as a win-win situation for yourself, for other people, for animals, for the environment. What would you like people listening right now to take away from this, to go and research, or how can they get engaged?
I think it's absolutely very important for people to, very common you see people reducing their footprint, maybe their carbon footprint or whatnot, using less plastics, consuming less meat, driving less, maybe reducing your possessions or the amount of impact that you have based on what you own and what you interact with in your daily life. But so reducing your footprint is a great thing. A lot of people talk about that, but I think increasing your handprint is something they talked about a lot at Kaliyala, and I really like that a lot. It's increasing the amount of social good you do toward others, like to helping other people or doing things that help others or make it easier for others to live sustainably, or giving back to community, or being part of education, or like showing people other ways to live sustainably, or to promote social good within their own communities. And so oftentimes, while we can reduce our own footprint, I think it's just as good to kind of really spread the knowledge and spread your passion for living sustainably to others, and to help spread that good in the world for you hippies out there.
Yeah, granola and all. That's great. Yeah, for the listeners who haven't heard me on Lynn's show before, I'll mention I've been homeschooled, and Jordan was homeschooled for a time as well. We grew up pretty much together in Ojai, and my dad always likes to say, anytime I do something, even now at 23 years old, or almost 23 years old, that it's somehow homeschooling related, and you're going out and putting your hands in the dirt and getting things done, and it seems like that's one of the best educations you can get.
Absolutely.
And it's exciting to think that education, your university can be a jungle in Panama, it can be in the Arctic, it can be anywhere that you want to apply yourself. I'm curious about what you learned about managing a community. I mean, it seems like there wasn't too much drama. There was an overall interest in democracy in this little town. But any lessons for people who are trying to, I think you used the words intentional living. Any lessons for people who are trying to go out and sort of set off and do something maybe off the grid or off the beaten path at least, and doing that with a large multitude of people? Or what are the challenges? What are the lessons you can impart to us now?
I think it's really oftentimes, like you said, you can have your education in the jungle or the Arctic. It really depends on where you are and with the people you're with. I was lucky enough that our community didn't have much drama. That was based off the individuals we had. I think it's really kind of a trial and error process. You put something into place where what the majority of common belief is among the people that you have, and you try and go off that. And then when it doesn't work, you try and make it work again. You kind of you got to change it up every once in a while. But
that's great. And yeah, I think Spence's got a question here.
Okay, so since you guys were raised in hippiedom,
yes,
what do you say to the rest of the world? Because a lot of people say there's 300 million people in the U.S. A lot of them live in big cities. Then there's 1 billion or so people in India, 1 billion or so people plus in China. So how does this teeny little thing that we're trying to do expand and translate to all of those folks?
I think we need to look at the success stories of like things within these communities, within these smaller hippiedom communities, as you'd put it. And
hey, I was raised on hippie.
No,
trust me, I'm
I don't hate the hippie.
I could be your granddad at this point, but seriously, I went through the whole deal, and that it seems to be one of the issues, though.
I think you're right. I think the biggest issue is kind of scaling out, and we faced a lot of that at Kaliyala. You can have something work great within the microcosm of a little village in the jungle, but you really need to scale out and find solutions to affect the bigger populations of the planet. And I think honestly, we need to kind of broadcast of the success of these certain stories, but at the same time inspire people to find innovative solutions and to create different sorts of systems for success on their own, because like I said, it's different everywhere you go. You can't have the same systems in effect here in California that are going to go and solve hunger in India and things like that.
Or
right?
Beijing, clear up the air there.
Exactly,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So having these innovative minds and people inspired to find different sorts of change and create different possible solutions and creative solutions for change everywhere is really is the biggest thing we can do. So I think creating different forms of education and really encouraging innovation and different types of solution finding and failure, essentially.
And one of the other, since I was way back to the anti-nuke days when we used to go to
Yep.
those protests a long time ago, like 76 or so, one of the things they said about the anti-nuke movement was it smelled like granola and backpackers. And that was always the comment that we battled against back then. So it is, as you know, you've done a lot of stuff, but to get that word in your community is easy. You're probably in mostly agreement. But when you go to the other level, it's got to be problematic.
Absolutely. It's an uphill battle. Really coming home from, a lot of people I was with down there, they go home to different communities around America, but I have the luxury of coming back to California, to Ojai. I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I need to. I'm really focusing on. I think what I was most inspired by there is building communities of people who want to make change like this, and going out into places in the world where this isn't, common knowledge, common conversation, and spreading that, because coming home here really doesn't change much. So I need to go to the places of the world that aren't thinking this way and help inspire change in that way.
It sounds to me like a big part of that is going and talking to your neighbors, or if you live in Ojai, you might have more of a bubble, but still, you'd be surprised, I guess. You find people who are been living next to you for years, and they think very differently, and having a respectful dialogue, being willing to go out on a limb, and tying into what you said about not just in the projects having failure, but failure in your communications too. I mean, going out and reaching out, going out on a limb, and trying to connect with someone who might not think the way you do, because it is otherwise just an echo chamber, and then it's kind of you're not really, maybe you're helping your ego. But it sounds like you are. I just want to commend you, because it sounds like you're really kind of walking your talk here by both going out around the world to do what you want to do, and coming here and coming to people who don't think like you, and trying to at least have your say. And maybe people will still disagree, but you have something you really believe in, and you're putting yourself out there and putting the time and energy that it takes. So I would like to compliment you on that.
Oh, thank you, Journey. I think that a lot of the times the issue is the words we use, and avoiding those buzzwords, honestly, and using language that is easy for everyone to understand. A lot of these topics and a lot of this material is really quite appealing and common sense to everyone if you approach it in the right way. Or maybe using certain words like permaculture or like sustainability among farmers in the United States is not
or climate
easy,
change.
Climate change is a huge turnoff for them as a talking point. But if you can phrase it in ways that save money, and phrase it in ways that save your soil quality, and increase your yield, and provide more value to the food you're producing, then I think that it becomes a lot more appealing to a lot more people.
No one's going to argue with cleaner water, cleaner air,
exactly,
and
more profit, right?
More profit, yeah.
People, planet, profit, triple bottom line.
Taking care of everybody.
Absolutely.
That is great. Well, let's see. I think we're just approaching the end of our hour. We've got about another 3 minutes left. I'm thinking, if Vice had come, would you have wanted to be in that documentary while you were there? Or?
I've gone back and forth on that. I don't think I would have, honestly, based purely off of the people who were on there. I think I wouldn't have, from what I've seen, wouldn't have gotten along with as well. I don't feel like I have too much of a TV personality, and it was.
Well, you've got a great radio personality.
Oh well, thank you, Johnny. That's good. Yeah. But yeah, I don't think I would have, honestly. No.
No, that's fair. That's fair. Sometimes you're a man of action, not words. Well, here you've got some words, but overall, you don't want to be there for the camera crews. That's great, and I admire that. Let's see. So, in closing, do you? If someone wants to get involved with this, where can they go? Is this something they can find online? Is this something they have to write snail mail and have it delivered to the camp or to the?
It's pretty tough. There's not quite a mail system in Panama, so all the mail that they receive is brought by individuals. But yeah, you can look it up online, or you can check out the Vice Latin documentary series, which will be airing soon, which I'll have to catch up on myself. I actually haven't watched it, but
that's cool.
Yeah, it's available. There's a lot of social media, Facebook advertising, things like that. A lot you can read online.
So our viewers can bear in mind that it's an interesting start for the topic and understanding Kalayala, but in terms of television, there is always the demand that we make things more interesting than maybe they can be in a concise way. So that's good, and it's been a real pleasure to have you on. I think we've got another moment left, and I just want to thank listeners for tuning in, and you, Jordan, for coming on to talk to us. Yeah. This has been good. I've got my head spinning here, thinking of how I can, build a garden in my backyard now or something, set up a water treatment system and so on. So that's something that we can all do, again, regardless of your politics and your perspective on things. And it's exciting to have you on. I think if people want to talk to you more, if they want to ask you questions, can we find you? Should I sell you out here? Or I think people can find you on Facebook.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So if anyone wants to talk to Jordan more about this remarkable experience directly, get a human face on where you can go with Kaliyala, then by all means reach out to him. I think.
1 minute.
Oh, we got just a moment left. So. Lynn will be back next week with another awesome show. She always has really incredible guests. She's off with family right now, I think. And I am just so delighted that I've been able to be here with you and to speak on issues related to climate change and getting people to understand more, whether we agree with things or not, understand more about each other and about possible solutions. And it's really life-affirming to know that there is someone, there's a lot of people out there who are trying, again, regardless of your ideology, you just want to work and help with other people. So thank you for listening. This is News Talk KVTA 1590 AM. This is the Lynn Fairley and Fabulous Friends Show. My name is Journey Wade-Hak. That was Jordan Zweig. Thank you.